And we welcome you to our preview show for the PIAA State Basketball Tournament. One round in the books. We've got the second round coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday night, and then the quarters on Friday and Saturday. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, a week from tonight, it'll be the state semifinals, and a week from Thursday, the PIAA State Basketball Championships will take place in Hershey Park, or Giant Center in Hershey Park, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Once again, the host. And we're going to have a slew of guests on here tonight. James Dotson will be stopping in from time to time. He's producing tonight's show. We're going to talk first to Dan Sustek from PennLive.com. He had one of the more incredible games in the first round. He had the Chambersburg-Coatesville game in boys 6A, so we're going to get Dan's take on that. And also some of the Mid-Penn teams and District 3 teams that we could be seen along the way. We're going to talk to Chris Massey of the Williamsport Sun-Gazette as well, Brad Everett from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and Tom Reisenweber is going to stop by from the Erie Times a little bit later on in the show. And you'll hear from James from time to time. Many of you remember us from the state football finals. We're going to have all 12 state finals for you again on the PIAA Radio Network coming up in a couple of weeks in Hershey. Let's get right into it. Dan Sustek is joining us from PennLive.com. And, sir, you had one of the craziest games in the opening round. First of all, the West now, or quote-unquote the West, is completely wide open at this point now. And we'll get your take on maybe like a favorite, but you had Archbishop Wood going down. They lose to Souderton in round one. They were one of the heavy favorites. Imhotep is still alive. They're on the eastern side of the bracket, or quote, the eastern side of the bracket. But your game, Coatesville and Chambersburg, I don't know many outside of Fulton County or Sean Schreffler, the head coach of Chambersburg. I don't know many people thought it was going to go the way it did, but man, what a win by Chambersburg in that opening round game.
Yeah, I was telling people, like, don't be surprised if Chambersburg keeps it close, because my first job out of college was working at the Chambersburg Public Opinion down there, so I've been covering that program in particular for a while, and I think you can count on your both your fingers, both your hands, the number of coaches that you could take over Sean Schreffler just if you gave the team in a vacuum. He just always has them ready to play. They've done this in the past. They went down to Plymouth Whitemarsh, pulled off an upset. I believe he was on the staff when they ended Rip Hamilton's career against Coatesville.
Yep.
And funnily enough, two of the starters on the Chambersburg Trojans this year, their dads were on that team. So a little bit of a connection to that. But I did not think that they were going to be able to go down in Coatesville in that environment and, pull out that win. But Sean said after the game, he said, our first practice, I looked everyone in the eyes and said, who do you think's the underdog in this game, us or them? And they, every single player said us. And I think they said, they prefer it to be that way in the playoffs. And that's an easy thing to do after you win, right? Kind of tell those stories. But I thought what was so impressive about them is that when you see these upsets, a lot of times it involves crazy shot making, right? Like in the Souderton game, I believe they hit 15 threes. We're just on fire from three. That was not how Chambersburg won this game. I mean, Grayson Kagaris hit, I think, 4 threes, but their buckets were largely just well-executed plays where they got the ball down low and got a good look at the paint. They drew fouls. They generated open looks. And then the defense, the job they did on Colton Hiller, the 5-star recruit, was just exceptional given the personnel they have. Because last year they had J.J. Kelly, one of the best athletes in the entire state, who's now playing at the University of Ohio. He graduates this year, and they've got a good roster, an experienced roster, but they don't have quite that athleticism to match up with the 6'7" guy like Colton Hiller. But they were just so fundamentally sound. I lost track of shooting numbers at the end because the game got a little wild. But I know he started the game 3 for 13. He's playing with a splint on his finger, so he was a little banged up. But still, the job they did on him was exceptional. Just defensively, they were terrific all game. It was just a game. You don't like boiling it down to this, but they were just so fundamentally sound, absent a third quarter run where they had a handful of turnovers, which is going to happen against a team like that. But
right.
And like I said, like when you're watching the NCAA tournament, when Fairleigh Dickinson beats Purdue, it's because a bunch of guys start hitting crazy shots. Whatever. That was not really what happened in this one.
Yeah, that was in just some of the highlights I saw and some of the things I read about that game. That was one of the things that sort of stood out. You guys all do a great job with your Christian Eby. I throw a hat tip out to him, to your colleague at the Carlisle Sentinel. He did a great job with some highlights from the Trinity game too. You guys all put out great content on the socials. and kind of take us inside the game. And I know the game's streamed live on Penn Live too. What a game to
Yeah,
pick for that
yeah,
too. That
no
was
doubt.
a heck of a pick for that one. So looking forward here, Chambersburg Central Catholic. That's round 2 coming up on Wednesday, and then they're in this pod with Upper St. Clair. James and I saw the Upper St. Clair team a week ago in the WPIL finals against Newcastle, and then Red Lion stays alive. Up above, though, it gets a little bit interesting because Central Dauphin, the District 3 champ, is still there. They take on the Souderton team that beat Archbishop Wood. And then the winner of that game is going to get either Methacton or Newcastle. Now, if you go to the top half, somebody between Plymouth, Whitemarsh, Father Judge, and Imhotep is going to have to survive. And Whitemarsh and Judge will cancel each other out potentially in the next round. And then Imhotep wouldn't see either one of those until a state semifinal. Parkland's also there. Del Valley is there. They always seem to have a really good team year after year. They had to hang on to beat Abington in round 1. Size this up now because, and let's like kind of throw the top half of the bracket out because we know that those 3 teams are going to be the heavy favorite up there. But I mean, do the Rams have a shot here? Like, do they have a chance to go on a run here now that this
I
path is kind of clear?
I think they do, and I mean, the trap is, them kind of seeing, oh wow, we're not playing Archbishop Wood, we're playing Sourdough, and kind of taking their foot off the gas. And then you kind of lose sight on the fact it's like, well, Sourdough did beat Archbishop Wood, so you know that if you can beat Archbishop Wood, you can probably beat any team in the entire bracket. But this Central Dauphin team, um, is their starting lineup is so athletic and so long that they're going to match up well with a lot of these teams. I mean, they took Bonner Prendy to overtime early in the
Mm-hmm.
year before they even got their top transfer, Jared D'Olimpio from Cumberland Valley, who's a terrific player, averages double digit. That's kind of, I think, their strength is that any night it could be one of their 5 starters. There's not really a go-to guy. It's very much by committee. I'd say Shakur Starling is kind of their most consistent, their most consistent kind of star.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a Bucknell offer, but it's more just they can just come at you in a variety of different ways, and they have a lot of length. They can really defend. They play really hard on that end. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think they've got a shot. I know the Newcastle team's very good. I know that the Upper St. Clair team is always going to be really good, and Central Catholic, they're always going to have talent there as well. But I mean, it's set up about as well as you could for this Rams team. They had a couple losses in the year that were kind of weird and fluky. They lost to Harrisburg, but I think that they're playing really good basketball right now. They were tested in the district playoffs, and I was talking to someone. So that top of that District 3 bracket, in 6A now looks pretty darn good because you have Central Dauphin, Chambersburg, Central York, Red Lion, and York High all advancing. So it's really they definitely were tested in that bracket as well. So yeah, you didn't expect it to look like this in the second round for them.
I was led to believe by some of our mutual friends, who I will keep his name out of it for
Yeah.
now, but but I was led to believe by some of our friends that we have that the mid pen, not only the mid pen, but District 3 as a whole has been down across the board this season. No
Mhm.
Harrisburg. I know they made the district tournament, but they have had an up and down year. Cumberland Valley had a great year last year, was not able to put together a run this year. Size up the mid pen as a whole. Tell me what's going on. I mean, I know McDevitt's still really good
Mhm.
at the 4A level. In fact, they may make a run. Hershey got knocked out in round 1. I know they had great battles with Milton Hershey this year. Berks Catholic knocked out. They were considered maybe a favorite. Reading got knocked out of districts early. There just so many of the typical or the traditional powers gone. I mean,
Mhm.
Trinity is still going to be there in 3A. We'll talk about them here in a minute, but size up the mid pen, size up District 3 as a whole. You're right in the heart of it. You guys cover the heck out of it at Penn Live. What is this district like this season, and is it quality? Is it like are all these teams kind of a surprise? What's missing? What's been good about it this year?
Well, I wasn't too shocked because if you go back and look at our first and second team all stars from a year ago, I believe 8 of the 10 graduated. It was one of those years where you lose J.J. Kelly, who's Lowenschlager. You lose Nolan Bazolka from Cumberland Valley. You lost Wayne Fletcher from Central Dauphin. You just lost a ton of talent. The returning player of the year, Cam Sweeney's on Hershey, but they lost a lot of guys from their state runner-up team. So in that regard, I'm not surprised. but it did feel watching that, that there was a sort of sense around the area that, hey, this has been sort of it was just kind of there was kind of a weird feel around the year that, a lot of teams are kind of repositioning. There were some new coaches in the area too. And that's why I thought that Milton Hershey was maybe the team best position to make a run. And they kind of fizzled out a little bit towards the end of the year as well. But I mean, in terms of the first round of states, maybe some of those worries were a little, overblown because, yeah, as you see, Chambersburg's able to beat Coatesville. Obviously, Central Dauphin advances. You got Bishop McDevitt, who's continually improved, and I mean Trinity in a season, I thought Trinity was going to take kind of a step back. They really haven't. They've been pretty impressive this year with how they've been able to put things together with depth, as opposed to the last few years where they've had one of the best players in the state, Owen Schlager. So, yeah, I think that a lot of kind of the regular season kind of up and down could be a little attributed to the graduations. There were two, like there are a handful of long-standing guys that kind of remain. Nasir Barnes at York High, who's
Mhm.
York High's all-time scorer, then Kingston McCoy at Berks Catholic, who's head to Colgate. Those are kind of the two really big names that returned. And I know Berks Catholic was eliminated, and Cam Sweeney and Hershey was obviously eliminated. But yeah, I'm wondering if a lot of these teams just sort of were building towards the postseason and they're now feeling a little more comfortable.
Interesting matchup in 3A on Wednesday night at Richland High School, where District 3 champ Trinity takes on Mohawk. That's a game that James and I will have on our network, the Lawrence County Sports Network, out this way in Western PA. But talking to Larry Koslak yesterday, I think you brought up a good point about that depth. He's got a lot of talent on this team. He said that a lot of guys are still improving. And the ironic thing about Owen Schlager is the fact that he goes to Siena
Yeah,
with Jerry McNamara as the head coach, the Jerry McNamara who Larry Kostelak,
that's how they got
of
connected.
all
Yeah.
guys, is like great friends with, despite the game that they had at Martz Hall way back in the day where GMAC dropped 55 on them. But this Trinity team, tell us a little bit about them too, because again, traditional power, and they kind of have a path here, themselves, but they're going to have to do it through the West. If they get through this game with Mohawk, it's either Forest Hills, a really talented Forest Hills team that we saw last year that returns about, I think, three of the starting five from a season ago. And Aliquippa somehow ends up winning the WPIL title. I don't ask me how, because the times that we saw them, they did not look like typical Aliquippa. And then
Mhm.
they put it together at the end of the year for a run. What does Trinity look like? Size them up a little bit here going into the second round of the state tournament.
Yeah, I think the first name you got to look at is Andre Steele, point guard, junior point guard, he's had a lot of reps the last 2 years, even playing behind Owen. He's a really shifty guard who can shoot, but I love his defense. I think he's among the mid-pen leaders in steals. He really gets after it defensively. He pairs. They have a lot of these guard wing kind of hybrid type guys. Nicholas Smith is a really long guard that's really good defensively as a sophomore. Marcus Yeager was our football defensive player of the year. He's heading to Richmond for football, and he actually he doesn't play quite the football play, like a football player playing basketball. He doesn't exactly play like that. He's a little more of kind of a finesse kind of forward type player, but he's been strong. And I think the biggest emergence for them throughout this postseason has been Liam Sexton, who's
Hmm.
actually he's a baseball player, but he's 6'6", 6'7". Had a big game in the district final at 18 points. Talked to Larry Kosteluk about him after the game, and he said, we were really expecting him to kind of develop as a sophomore, but he broke his arm. I believe it was a broken arm, and that kind of stunted his development a little bit. Then he started to focus more on baseball. But he's been really good in the postseason so far and gives him a little bit of that added size dimension. I think they have a couple guys off the bench. Nike Craig's another guy that's going to be another one of their big time players. What's fascinating to me as you look at it is they also lost Kenyon Portee Jr., who's now Bishop McDevitt's top scorer.
Hmm.
If they had somehow held on to him, they had also lost Reese Brown, who transferred to Harrisburg. But if they had held on to Portee, I mean, man, this team would have been even more loaded. But they're still in pretty good shape because of, like I said, they can just throw. They can come at you in waves. If Larry doesn't like the way one of his lineups is playing, he can throw a completely different lineup at you. And I mean, you've watched a ton of basketball. That has so much value in the
It
postseason.
does. Yeah,
Yeah.
it truly does. How about any other District 3 teams, either on either side, boys or girls? Give us maybe like one or two to keep an eye on here as the second round gets underway tomorrow night.
I mean, Bishop McDevitt is the one. They've got a tough one with Archbishop Carroll, but I've been so impressed with them. They had a coaching change at the start of the year. We wrote an article. It was kind of very weird circumstances for a coaching change after they gave Devon Prep last year the toughest game Devon Prep had in the entire bracket.
Mm-hmm.
But they have been so impressive to me this year. Almost beating Berks Catholic in the district title game when I don't think many people gave them a shot. Porty Jr., who I mentioned, is a big time player. He's a 6'4" guard who rebounds really well and can shoot. But their two seniors, Ethan Hammer and Patrick Denisco, have been with this program for four. They've been 4-year starters, and McDevitt doesn't like losing in these big sports, right? But earlier in their careers, they took a lot of their lumps, like their basketball. I remember at one point, like their basketball team the first couple of years. There's a lot of football players that were kind of shuffling in and out. I think at one point even Stone Saunders was playing at like third quarter only of basketball games, and it was just the program was kind of at a weird place. But those two kids have been winners since they stepped on the court and have constantly helped them develop. And Ethan Hammer in particular has just been terrific. Carroll's a really tough matchup. They're always going to be a really tough matchup, but Jim Rao has these guys playing so well right now, and they're one of those teams that you're going to have to do. Like, you're not going to be able to go in there with your foot off the gas pedal. They're gonna be up 15 quick. So they're the team I'm looking for on the boys side. On the girls side, it's been fun to watch Susquehanna Township. First district title win in 40 years. Susquehanna Township they're one of those schools in Dauphin County that kind of gets a little overlooked. Everyone always thinks about the Harrisburgs, the Bishop McDevitts, those schools, but the Hannah fans are really passionate. They have really gone behind this team. Ava London is a top player on this team. JC Martin, they've got a bunch of really talented girls on this team. So I would not be surprised if they make a little bit of a run either.
Where are you at tomorrow night, and where are you at Wednesday night?
I'm Bishop McDevitt, Archbishop Carroll on Tuesday night, and on Wednesday I will be checking out Central Dauphin Saturton at Hamburg. I'm, trying to spread the wealth a little bit and see the Rams, because in case they go on that run, you want to be there for a little bit of the early parts too. So
I'm already sweating potentially the alma mater playing Newcastle on Saturday. That'll be a rough one for me to go through if I get it.
I'm just praying if we get a East versus West, we get Clearfield, so I can go to Denny's Beer Barrel. And I had that burger for the first time last year, and it's now been making me wish for an expense trip to Clearfield, PA.
The life of a journalist. You're always looking for the food or the coffee stop.
Exactly.
Tell everybody where they can find you on social media, and also penlive.com. Yes, it is subscription-based, but very cheap. You can get in there. You can get it by the month, by the year if you want to. It's worth the read, but tell everybody where they can find you on socials.
Yeah, I'm Dan_Sostic on Twitter. That's where you're going to find most of my live coverage and work. And I appreciate you having me on. Always fun to talk hoops with you, Eric.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you again down the line. Dan Sostek from penlive.com. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Safe travels.
Yep.
We are going to move right along to Brad Everett from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and he is also jack of all trades, and we're going to get him caught up here in one moment. And then Chris Massey will join after, and Tom Reisenweiber from Go Erie will come up at around 8:45. So we're going to try to get you kind of a look across the state. There's a lot to get to, especially with Western PA and the slew of teams that are left from the WPIL. 7 in some cases, 5 in some other cases. And one of the best guys to cover it all is Brad Everett from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we are glad to have him along right now. Brad, how you doing tonight? Have to get him unmuted. There we go.
All right, I think I should be good right now, man. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Absolutely. How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. Just trying to make that transition a little bit from the winter sports season to the spring sports season, doing some baseball previews. So,
oh my goodness, already.
Yeah, I feel really out of touch with that stuff. So I'm really happy to be talking some basketball.
What's been your assessment through the first round? Let's talk a bit about these WPIL teams across the board. So anywhere, boys, girls, any class. Anybody surprise you after round one? Tell us a little bit about what you saw over the weekend, Friday and Saturday, and what you're looking forward to here as the second round gets underway tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think some of the surprises to me were there were a few upsets. I thought Moon beating Hershey was one I definitely didn't expect. Hershey, I saw them last year. They beat Chartiers Valley in the state semifinals, Class 5A, and they returned most of their key guys. And I really thought that it, could come down between Hershey and Char Valley as far as the western half of the state. But Moon had different plans, so that was a huge win there for the Tigers. And there was a couple dramatic finishes on Saturday. Seton LaSalle won late. They had a home run pass from their freshman point guard, and he threw it down the court, and they scored the winning points with about 20 seconds left. And I don't know if you saw the end of the Eden Christian game, but it was the opposite there. They had a kid turn it over in the backcourt in the final seconds, and they lost a heartbreaker there. It was pretty cool seeing so many teams who haven't won PIAA playoff games in a long time do that. We had Knock. They got their first PIAA win since 1997, which followed up their first ever WPIAL title. Joe Lafko making a huge difference there already. Um, that was pretty cool. We had Jefferson Morgan, their first PIAA win since 2000. South Park, their first state win since 2000. And we had some big scores. Friday night, Justin Fry, he was cooking, I'll tell you that. 40 points to lead TJ to their first playoff win in the state playoffs since 2014. And Luke Scarf, the big guy from South Park, he dumped in 42 points to lead South Park to a win there. So it was cool to see the big time performances. And another one was Chartiers Valley. Chartiers Valley, they play a team from Reading, Exeter Township. They knocked down 15 3-pointers in that game, despite their star player, Luca Federico, who it was probably his coming out party in the WPIAL championship. He was held to 1 point in that game, and they still knocked down the threes. They hit 15, and they beat Exeter. And poor Exeter, they had to drive 258 miles to get to Shore Valley. They lost, and they got to drive 258 miles back. So I feel bad for those kids, but that's his life in the PIAA brackets.
Yeah, and that bracket is interesting. We're talking 5A boys there, because the bottom half of it, you're assured of at least up one WPIL team between Moon or Thomas Jefferson that'll get into the quarters. You could potentially have an all District 7 quarterfinal like both quarterfinals could be basically the WPIL tournament again. You have Gateway, who plays Johnstown. You have Char Valley, who plays Cacalico. Moon and TJ play, and Penn Hills plays West York. I think West York's probably going to be a favorite in that game. But the fact that we may just redo the WPIL tournament for the state quarters, I mean, the depth at the 5A level in the WPIL, nope. I mean, I know that there's been a lot written about that Gateway team, but it's like everybody kind of forgot about them after the WPIL playoffs. They're still lurking there, and they still got one of the best players in the state.
Yeah, that's a great point. If we really could see 4 WPIAL teams come into that Final Four on the western side of the bracket, just like you said, I think West York is a favorite in that game against Penn Hills, but with the way that Amon Hawthorne's been playing, I mean, I wouldn't count them out against anybody. Great coach too, and Chris Giles, and they're going to give West York a run for their money. I'll be covering the Moon TJ game on Tuesday night. Definitely look forward to that. Moon coming off the win against Hershey. Thomas Jefferson, I mean, the way Justin Fry and Nick Turkla and those guys are playing, that's going to be a heck of a game. Chartiers Valley, I would think they're probably favored going into the semifinals. And just like you said, Gateway, they're kind of a team no one's really talking about. I think Michael Bruce McCommon, probably one of the 2 or 3 best players in the WPIAL this season, and they'll be playing Johnstown. I could see them getting past them. So yeah, just like you said, that's a pretty good year for 5A, I think, in the like for the WPIAL.
On the girls' side, staying in the 5A classification, South Fayette, I mean, I know you've seen them. You were at the Pete for the WPIL finals. It is, again, quite literally going to possibly be an all WPIL quarterfinal on the girls' side, too, in 5A. But South Fayette, if they get through Penn Trafford coming up on Wednesday night, I mean, is anybody getting in that team's way?
Absolutely not. And no offense to any of the other teams in that bracket there, but this South Fayette team, I really think this is one of the better teams that we've had from the WPIAL on the girls' side, probably in the past 25 years. I mean, we've had some good teams. I think it was 2019. We had the undefeated Chartiers Valley team that, had the long winning streak. Definitely got to put them up there. The same with Peters Township and McKenna Marissa. And there's been some others too, but man, South Fayette, they are like building a dynasty right now, and the pipeline is huge. And they have, 5 Division I players on their team. They got talent coming up. They have they have down in 8th grade, they have a girl named Chloe Lane, who's the granddaughter of Jerome Lane,
Oh
and
my.
she already has a Division I offer. So yeah, the pipeline's pretty deep there, and I just cannot see South Fayette losing, and I think they'll win the title. But will any team try to play a slowdown game against them? That's going to be interesting. They had that playoff game against Trinity. It was 8-6 at halftime, and I think they ended up winning by 2 points. That would have been one of the biggest playoff upsets in Whippeal history, but South Fayette was able to hang on there. So I'm interested to see if anybody tries to slow them down and kind of take their skill and athleticism out of the game. And I don't like seeing games like that, but that might be a good way to attack them. I don't know.
We're talking to Brad Everett from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, talking about the WPIL, the Western PA teams. In 4A girls, again, potentially 3 really good slots for the 3 best WPIL teams in 4A. I know you saw that Oakland Catholic team. We were at the same venue a couple weeks ago for the WPIL semifinals. They get Slippery Rock, but I'm paying close attention to the bottom half of that, where you have Blackhawk and Bell Vernon, and then North Catholic and Harbor Creek. If we get a Blackhawk North Catholic quarter and Oakland Catholic slips through there, and it's Oakland Catholic against either one of those two for the right to go to the state title game. I mean, it's good that Oakland Catholic is now back on top. It's been too long. They were perennial winners there with Susie McConnell-Serio back in the early 2000s, and now it seems like they got this machine rolling again. But what a cluster of teams that is on that western side in girls 4A.
Yeah, it really battle tested too. I mean, talk about some great programs there. Oakland Catholic, all the success they've had over the years. Blackhawk, of course, going all the way back to Dory Oldiker, and when she was the coach, and they just won a state title a couple years ago. And we know North Catholic and Molly Rotman. I mean, they're always in the mix. So some really good programs there. The best I've seen definitely is Oakland Catholic. I saw them beat North Catholic in the Whippeal semifinals, and again against Blackhawk in the Whippeal championship game. And I'll tell you what, I saw Josie Fontana play a few times the last couple years, and I thought she was really good, but she really took another step this year, and she is, she's really a force down low, scoring and with rebounds, and she'll be going to Richmond along with Erica Gribble from Greensburg Central Catholic. So 2 really good freshmen going to Richmond from the Whippeal, so that'll be exciting.
I want to ask you about 2 boys things. Number one, in 3A, me personally, having seen Aliquippa mid-season when they lost to Mohawk, I wasn't surprised that they were able to put this thing together and get to the WPIL final, because they still have a ton of talent. And what they're doing there without the Pratt brothers and a new system, a new coach. I know he was an assistant under Nick Lakovich for a long time, but what that program did in getting back to the Pete to win. But then not only that, but they beat South Allegheny, who I thought, once I saw them beat Mohawk in WPIL quarters, I thought for sure semis. I thought for sure that South Allegheny was going to repeat. And that Aliquippa team just, for whatever reason, when the lights go on and the postseason shows up, that team, whether it's football or basketball, knows how to get it done. Can you tell us a little bit about that team and what's making them tick, and why are they now are all of a sudden playing their best basketball this season?
I don't want to say it's exactly plug and play with them, but it kind of is a little bit, because I mean that system that they run over there, it is just, it doesn't matter who the coach is, who the players are. They play tough man-to-man defense. They get up in your face. They are just relentless defensively, and they're fast and athletic. And a lot of their opponents aren't used to seeing a team skilled like they are, that just have all that speed and play defense like them. And I think too, one thing about Aliquippa is, I think, especially for teams that haven't played them, there's that Aliquippa mystique, and they see the Aliquippa on the uniform, and they know how many titles they've won, and so much has been spoken and written about them. And I think sometimes they go into the game and maybe a couple points up just before the game even begins, because other teams, I don't want to say they fear them, but they're definitely a little worried about playing them. But this Aliquippa team, yeah, been really good under Murray Smith, and great performance by Khalil Good. I mean, one of the best performances by an Aliquippa player in a Whitfield championship game. He was outstanding, and it's just the beat goes on with that program. And I'll be interested to see if we'll see maybe Aliquippa Mohawk. Maybe they're in the state quarterfinals. It was good to see Mohawk bounce back from the loss there to South Allegheny in the Whitfield playoffs. They'll have a tough test though against Trinity. I don't know too much about this Trinity team in particular, but considering they're 20 wins, 2 losses, and the District 3 champions, I gotta expect they're pretty good.
So the other big thing I got to ask you about now, because you were right in the center of it after the 2A WPIL final. Swickley Academy wins. They beat Jeanette. They're on opposite sides. They would not meet till a state semi. Jeanette has all but guaranteed that if they play them again, they're going to win. What is it? What was that like going through kind of that whole? I mean, that was a really physical game. Whatever happened at the end of the game, people, it's still kind of a topic on social media, and some of the comments about recruiting and all those other kind of things. Swickley didn't win the WPIL last year, but they got to the state final. They lost to Linville Hill, and had a chance to win it at the buzzer. But are these two teams basically destined to meet in a state semifinal one more time? And if they do, at that point, at that stage where Sewickley was a season ago and got past Greensburg Central Catholic to go to Hershey, who has the edge if those two end up clashing for a second time?
I really hope those two play again.
So
Still
do
got to
I.
win a couple more games, but I really hope that happens. I don't know. I think Sewickley Academy still has the edge in that game, but man, Jeanette is going to be fired up. That was really interesting after that game. I mean, it was a hard fought game, and Sewickley ended up pulling it out. And then the next thing I know, it was getting a little chippy towards the end of the game, and they go through the handshake line, and I kind of put my head down, I think, to write a little bit of my story. And I hear a bit of commotion coming from the court, and I'm like, "Whoa! Like, what's going on here?" We got guys on the court, we got players being held back, and people talking smack back and forth. So I was like, "Man, that was a heck of an ending." But that was just the start, because then we get to the news conference afterwards. We get to the media conference, and we're in there with Jeanette, and Coach Adrian Batts is in there with a bunch of his players, and some questions were asked. And Adrian Batts was being very careful, but what he was saying, I think he even said at one point, I need to bite my lip on this. Well, the players did not bite their lips at all. And the question I asked, wasn't even about any, claims of recruiting or anything like that. I asked the players, what was the difference in this game? And Kamani Brown, man, he did not hold back. And he said, they recruit and we don't. They have kids from Africa and we don't. They have money and we don't. And man, talk about just really speaking up about it. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are probably Kamani Brown fans a little bit now, because you know this situation, it's been going on here for a while, and while it hasn't been talked about too much on shows or podcasts or written about in the newspaper, I think a lot of people are aware what's going on over at Sewickley Academy. And um and I know there's a lot of people that don't like about what's going on over there. So and Kamani Brown spoke up, his teammates spoke up, and just like you said, they guaranteed that they're going to see them again and they're going to win the rematch. And I'll tell you what, that's going to be a tough ticket to get that night, because I'm sure that's going to draw a lot of fans. And if it does happen, hopefully it's a clean game and, nothing happens like what happened at the end of the last game. But that's going to be one of the biggest games of the whole entire PIAA tournament if that happens.
Yeah, it certainly will be. Tell everybody where they can follow you tomorrow and Wednesday, and where they can get your coverage afterwards too.
Absolutely. I'll be over at Peters Township on Tuesday. It's a doubleheader. We have the Cannon McMillan Alderdice game on the girls' side. We had Alderdice, by the way, their first PIAA win in 40 years. That was huge. So those two teams will clash off. And then Moon and TJ, like we talked about earlier, they play the second game tomorrow night. So that'll be a great one. And then I'll be seeing a Class 2A doubleheader the following night. We have the Aliquippa game, and then followed by Jeanette, I believe it is. So there'll be a couple really good games that night. And yeah, you can follow our coverage on postgazette.com and on my Twitter, which is at BReal412. And as long as the internet connection's good, I will be providing updates all night, but you never know with some gyms. So
Sounds good, sir. We'll do it again soon. Good luck to you in your travels, and hope you see a couple good games. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Sounds good, Eric. Thanks a lot for having me, buddy.
Yep, no problem. Brad Everett from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're going to jump right back into our next guest, who is Chris Massey of the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. That is the District 4 area. District 4 has always got a lot of good, talented teams, and they're always seemingly in the mix of everything with the PIAA tournament. You can follow him on Twitter. It is Doc Massey. Sir, long time no see. How you been?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So, after one round, your assessment so far of your area teams, you've got a couple that are in the mix coming up tomorrow night. Talk just freely, both boys and girls side of it. Who's impressed you? Who do you think has a chance to make a run out of your area?
Well, girls is easy for the Sun Gazette coverage area because Hughesville's our only team left. I think they have the potential to make a run. I don't think they're as good as Loyalsock was last year in terms of they had a superstar in Elena Dadsey and they had Lacey Kriebel, who's playing at Lock Haven right now. But Maddie Smith's a really good guard. I think she's an all-state candidate. And they have a good 7-player rotation. They play really good defense, and they just play relentlessly hard. They have a lot of good athletes. So tomorrow will be a good test against Notre Dame Green Pond, but it's a team that I think has a shot if they play really well to potentially win a few games. And then boys side, we have Warrior Run and Lewisburg. Lewisburg plays tomorrow. Both have tough games, but really like both teams. We cover 20 teams in our area. I thought they were the two best all season long. They both are really balanced. They've got height. They've got shooters. They're well coached. So maybe they're the underdogs in their games, but in years past, I would say these teams are going to get stomped in this game. This feels like they could go either way.
Tell us a little bit about, you had mentioned, the Loyalsock team from a season ago. Loyalsock got knocked out in the first round on the girls' side. Am I correct? I have to check the bracket.
Yep, to Holy Redeemer.
Yeah, Holy Redeemer, which it always seems like the District 2 and the District 4 schools somewhere along the line clash, and that's always a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A lot of time. Loyalsock the last couple of years. Hughesville's played a couple of them. So you're correct. Same in boys, too.
Where are we as far as like District 4 as a whole now? Because that Loyalsock team a couple years ago was really good. Williamsport, though, what's been going on with them? I mean, a lot of the talk, especially after the first round, just with some of the people I know that follow basketball. Again, we talked with Dan Sustek from Penn Live about this. No traditional powers like Harrisburg. You're not hearing anything about Reading because they get knocked out early. Where are the Millionaires? What has been going on with them, and what's it going to take for them to get back into a state tournament and make a run at some point?
Well, I think the future is really bright for them. They were really young this year, and I think they had a chance to win districts, but then their point guard Zion Hughes tore his ACL in the preseason playing basketball, and that was a pretty devastating blow for them. I think he had a good sophomore year starting for him, and I think he was poised for a great season. So they didn't really have that floor general. They had to move Nazir Lowe, who's more of a natural 2 guard to point guard, and they just didn't click. They were kind of inconsistent. There were times they looked awesome, times they looked like they had never played before, and a lot of times that was in the same game. So they have Tevin Williams, who's coming off a big sophomore season. They have a couple of freshmen, Makai Gaston and Salim Overton, that I think are going to be really good players. If Hughes can come back healthy next year, I think they've got a really good nucleus there. Their junior high program's pretty loaded. So on paper, they look really good for the next 2 years, I think. Whether that'll translate, we'll see. But I know Coach Alan Taylor's pretty excited. And I think the way their season ended, getting hammered by Delaware Valley in the district semifinals, will give them a little fuel for their fire.
Mm-hmm. Alan Taylor's been there a long time, too. So I think if you want to trust anybody, you can probably trust him to, at some point, get that ship headed in the right direction. We're talking to Chris Massey from the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. your game with you have Lewisburg left tomorrow against Pope John Paul. That is the District 1 champ, Martz Hall. If you're going to that game, you're the lucky one that gets to go to Martz Hall. But really, really good potential quarterfinal matchups there with Archbishop Carroll and then Bishop McDevitt winner. What do we need to look for with the Lewisburg team? What can you tell me about them? And do they have any shot to crack through this District 1 champ?
I think they do. Like I said, in years past, I think this has usually been the end of the road for a lot of our boys teams, but I really like the mix that Lewisburg has. All five starters average over 9 points a game. They're pretty experienced. They have three seniors that have started for the last couple of years, but then they have a sophomore guard, LJ Tucker, who just had a big game against Big Spring in the first round. And their freshman, Cortland Michaels, I asked him if he saw the movie White Men Can't Jump, because he reminds me of Billy Hoyle because he's like 5'7", he's super skinny. You look at him, you think, this guy can't be that good of a player, and he's just a fantastic point guard. He's one of the best point guards I've seen the last couple of years, and he's only a freshman. He's just a perfect floor general for them. So they've won 16 straight games. They're really balanced and playing well together. So I don't know if they'll win, but I think it's a good matchup. I think they're both evenly matched teams.
Last thing I'll ask you, how about the district as a whole? Because in recent years, and I mean, just maybe branch a little bit outside of the Williamsport area, get into some of the teams like in Shamokin. I know you saw a really good district final with the Shamokin boys team. It was a couple weeks ago in Montoursville, or who was it that they played in that game?
Montoursville, Lewisburg.
Yeah, I was following you. That's right. I was following you along in that that night. But how about the district as a whole in general? Like Mount Carmel's been pretty good on the girls' side in recent years. Southern Columbia's been pretty good on the girls' side. You know, Muncie seems like they make noise. They have a chance to pull an upset tomorrow. But just the district as a whole, what's your kind of like big picture about District 4? Because it always seems to like, you know, you're saying about maybe this is the point where the boys teams end, you know, their season, but it always seems like somebody's hanging around at some point come the semifinals too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go to the girls first. I think the girls are a little further ahead of the curve, I guess, in terms of postseason success the last few years. We mentioned Loyal Sock, and I think they were a team that could have made a run again this year, but they got ravaged by injuries. They lost two starters to serious injuries, and Elena Dazzi had another great year, but they just didn't have enough horses to make a run. But you know what they've done the last couple of years. Hughesville's in the second round for a third straight year, and Lourdes Regional. I think they'll go to the state final. We'll see if I'm right on that or not. But they made it to the Final Four last year, and everybody's back. You mentioned Mount Carmel, super young team. They gave Dunmore a battle in the first round, and as you said, they won a state title in 2021. Southern Columbia has a young team. They're in the second round, and they have that pedigree too. They went to the final in 2022. So I think on the girls' side, there's a lot of excitement for District 4 because a lot of the best teams right now, Hughesville too, they have a lot of good players coming back next year. And then on the boys' side, I think 4A is interesting because you mentioned Lewisburg, Montoursville, Mount Carmel, Shamokin. All four of them were really good Quad A teams. That was a fun tournament. And then I think what like Loyal Sock did, the boys did, and the girls did the last couple of years is open District 4's eyes and show them what's possible. I think they've kind of gotten past the point where I think a lot of times if they saw Catholic or Christian on the jersey, they got a little nervous. And I think they're past that now. I think they understand that if they control what they can control and play to the best of their abilities, they have a chance to make a run. And there's a lot of good young players in District 4 on both sides. So I think they're in a good place right now. I think there's a good foundation in place for future success.
I'll ask you one final thing, non-basketball playoff related. Did you get a chance to watch, for those listening, Chris is one of the biggest Niner fans out there. Did you watch the AMC series on the Montana years and Montana Rice years and all that?
I've watched it like 100 times already. It's absolutely glorious. And that's, I mean, they've had good teams in recent years, but they haven't won a Super Bowl in 31 years. So it brings back a lot of good memories. It's all, I might watch it again tonight.
Yeah, it was. I have not gotten through the whole thing yet, but it was, and I've said this to a
Yeah.
couple people. Like even as a non-Niners fan, you can't not love what that team was in the '80s. That was a lot of fun to get through those first two
Yeah.
cards for sure.
Yeah, it was a good time to be a young kid and get to walk through school strutting around in front. I grew up at Garden Valley, surrounded by Eagles fans, so that was a fun time to give them some reminders about who ran the NFL back then.
Yep, absolutely. Where are you
Not
going to
so
be?
much anymore.
Where are you going to be again tomorrow night? And tell everybody where they can find you on socials.
Yeah, I'll be going to Hughesville Notre Dame Green Pond game. So at Doc Massey on Twitter. Wednesday night, I'll be at the Warrior Run game against Alden Reed. So looking forward to both of them. I think they'll both be really good games.
All righty, sir. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy night. I know you got a lot of work to do, and hopefully we'll catch up down the line.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Chris Massey from the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. Our final guest on this preview or this recap show is Tom Reisenweiber from the Erie Times. Sir, good evening. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Give me your thoughts through round one of the state tournament. Who did you cover over the weekend? Tell us a little bit about your game and what you can expect from your coverage teams up your way here starting tomorrow night with the second round.
Yeah, District 10 had a little bit of a rough weekend. A lot of teams lost that I thought at least get through one game. But I think the main point for District 10 is Cathedral Prep boys in the 4A bracket. They're just scoring an incredible amount of points this season, 91.8 points per game. Only one loss was to 5A Newman Goretti in the Burger King Classic. That was, I think, like 107 to 91, something like that. So I think, the big story up here is Prep boys basketball. Three players that scored 20 points a game. Two of them have gone over 1,000. So it's going to be interesting to see their run. They have I think a winnable game tomorrow with Obama. I think they can beat the winner of Hickory and Deer Lakes on Friday, but then they run into probably Carver ENS on Monday in the semifinals, which could be a great game in the middle of the state. So that's the big story up here. We also have a really the 2A girls bracket is very strong overall in the West with District 6. District 7, District 10. Wilmington kind of shocked the world this year, beat Kennedy Catholic in a D10 championship to snap a 29-game win streak for Kennedy Catholic in the girls' D10 playoffs. And so they're the one, Kennedy's the two. Both teams very capable of making a run. I think people are kind of hoping they play each other again because they played 3 times this year. But District 6 is so solid, and so is District 7. So the 2A girls bracket looks like one of the better brackets in the West overall.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that one. Wilmington gets Winchester Thurston, who's the District 7 runner-up, and then potentially a matchup with District 6 champ Bishop McCourt. And then on the upper half of that bracket, you have Neshannock and Penzance Manor. That's a game that we'll have tomorrow night. And then Kennedy takes on Keystone. So you could get Neshannock and Kennedy Catholic, which has been kind of the pain in Neshannock's side the last couple of years to get to the semifinal, where it could be Wilmington and Kennedy once again.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Wilmington is one of those stories that they've been building that program up for the last couple of years, trying to get good enough to beat Kennedy. And they won their first ever D10 title. They got their first ever PIAA playoff win over the weekend, and they're just kind of more of a balanced team. They have 4 players scoring 9 points or more each game, led by Reese Bruckner, 1,000-point scorer. Alyssa Flicks, 10.7, Maya Jekovic, 9.8, and Avery Harlan, 9 points per game. And it's interesting, Kennedy Catholic, very small roster. I think they only have 8 kids that suit up in each game, but 2 superstars, Bella Magestro, who is the last daughter of head coach Justin Magestro. He's coached all of his kids. She's scoring 20.5 points per game. She's headed to Gannon next year, who's in the NCAA tournament coming up this week.
Yep.
And they have a junior, Tori Harvey, who is scoring 21.3 points per game, one of the best players in District 10 overall. So those two are pretty much, they have to have a star effort to make it through this bracket.
You mentioned Cathedral Prep on the boys' side in 4A, so they get the game with Central Valley where they handled them pretty easily. Obama seems like a favorable draw. The City League usually never does a lot of damage come the state tournament. Maybe that changes this year, who knows, but it's going to be a question to me of whether or not they can score with Kennedy Catholic. And then Deer Lakes or Hickory. If that's Hickory and Prep, I mean, is everybody in D10 just going to is their head going to explode if those two meet up?
Yeah, it's funny because they played each other in the D10 semifinals, and it was close for about 2.5 quarters, but then Prep ended up winning 95-69. I think that's what everyone's hoping for, is to see that game on Friday at Edinburgh University. It could be an interesting rematch, but yeah, it's interesting. Obama Academy barely beating Warren by 5. Warren was red hot in the D10 playoffs, but they were the 11th seed, so I didn't expect them to really compete with them. Another hot team is Deer Lakes. I mean, they were, I think, the 13th seed in the Whitfield playoffs, and all of a sudden they're in the state second round. So you can't take anything for granted if you're Hickory. But I fully anticipate a Prep Hickory rematch on Friday, which would be a lot of fun. But then just the war on Monday if that happens against Carver.
Yeah, Carver has Dallas coming up on tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and then the other second round game is Knock and North Catholic. So that's going to be interesting. That's a WPIL clash right there between those two. That Knock was the first time WPIL champion. North Catholic finished third in the district. You and I have had some discussions in the past via social media. Do you like how the brackets are kind of cross pollinated now? I mean, is it good to have the Eastern teams, in the West and vice versa? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the bracket, and just seeing some of these matchups, because yes, there's traditional, Western teams, and especially with District 7, because so many teams make it out of that district that it's impossible to not at some point see a rematch, maybe even from the WPIL playoffs. But the bracket itself, having some of the teams in the East, and then Carver is in the West here. That's I mean, that is as in Philly as it gets right there, playing through the western part of the state. Do you like kind of having these East West matchups, or would you prefer still a true traditional East West?
It's funny with just Carver real quick that they ended up being the 12-5 because they had to forfeit their
Yeah.
because of the brawl.
Yep.
No, I really wish we were in the East West pure brackets. I think it's tough because you think about the matchups in the semifinals. On Monday, Prep and Carver, if they play each other, they're going to the middle of state on a school night,
Yep.
and that's just brutal. And you think about the winner is going 4 hours home, then probably leaving Wednesday to go to Hershey because he played Thursday for the state title. So you're missing 4 or 5 days next week because of the way the brackets are set up. I think the only way to avoid that, and I was talking to Bob Greenberg about this earlier, that I think it was 1 year after COVID. There's just 1 year they did it where they played the first round in that first Tuesday and Wednesday. They didn't give it a week off after district playoffs were over, and then you have a week between semifinals and championship. So you have the weekend for the semifinals, weekend for the championship. I prefer that if they're going to keep the Eastern and Western bleeding into each other's kind of brackets, because it cuts down on travel on a school night. The one thing I would really like the PIAA to do is look at what Ohio does. The boys have their own weekend. The girls have their own weekend. The girls start a week earlier because they're not waiting on football. Obviously, the boys start a week later. So they have a Final Four in a city with multiple sites. Then they have the championship games in that a big arena. And I think we could do that if you went to Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. There's plenty of college arenas you can use and do Final Four, stuff like that. So there's different things that I think you can do to improve on the brackets and the experience for the kids, frankly. And with Mark Byers now in charge, maybe he's the guy to do it.
And you bring up a point too about the college sites, because I think the one thing that Western PA does better than anywhere else in the state. Now, this is throwing out the Palestra, because the Palestra does they'll obviously try to host something, big if it gets down to two Philly teams, but they had the Catholic League final at the Palestra in Philly. The colleges are really stepping up in the western part of the state to host these things. Mercyhurst has been fantastic the last couple of years hosting games. Slippery Rock, I think, has done a couple of them. IUP had a first round game on Saturday. They have a second round game coming up, I think, on Wednesday before they host the NCAA tournament, which, by the way, I'll be at. So I'll see your Gannon team there on a Friday. And probably I would imagine into maybe Monday night to play IUP again. We'll see. But the colleges out here are doing such a fantastic job of stepping up and wanting to host these games. I understand it's tough because you want to show your gym off, but you don't know if you have your conference tournament. You don't know if you have a regional until everything is kind of settled. And you kind of have to put your name in the jackpot a little bit earlier, to let them know that you can do it. But just some thoughts on some of the colleges. And then down in our area where we are in Pittsburgh, I mean, we have the monster gyms. We have the North Alleghenies and the Peters Townships, and schools like that can host these bigger events with big crowds. But the colleges all through Western PA, the smaller Division II schools and things like that, are doing a great job stepping up and getting some of these games.
Yeah, even recently Westminster has been a site for games too, and I guess I see it from one point of view that if I was a college, I'd be fighting for these games. No other way can you get 500 prospective students into a gym for no effort, basically. And I would put a guidance counselor or admissions counselor right next to the front door and say, who wants to fill out an application free? But the colleges do a pretty good job, and it's huge because I think it makes it more special for the kids to play on a college gym instead of a high school gym. The one thing I wish, we talked about different sites. I wish, when we were at Penn State for basketball, that was a lot of fun. But of course, they can't commit to anything because they don't know when the Big Ten tournament they might host or whatever. I wish there would be more communication a little bit. Even this past weekend, I was talking to somebody today how the PIAA wrestling was going on the same time as the Big Ten championships at Penn State. So you had a ton of Pennsylvania wrestling fans had to decide, what are you going to go to high school or are you going to go to college? So I wish there was a little more communication between the PIAA, the NCAA, and figure out how to make it more special for all these kids. But the colleges, for the most part, do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think so too. Where are you going to be at tomorrow night? What's your schedule on Wednesday? And tell everybody how they can find you on socials.
Yeah, Tuesday and Wednesday I'll be at Sharon. Tomorrow night we have Northwestern girls basketball with Michaela Presser Palmer, Arizona recruit, going at it. They're trying to make it past the first or second round for the first time ever. Then we'll have the prep game after that, and on Wednesday we'll have Mercier's Prep Olsh in boys, and we will also have another girls game on Wednesday as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how these teams all do. And then anyone I'll be tweeting throughout the games, ETN, Ryzen Weber, and we'll have stuff on GoReader.com as well.
You guys do an awesome job. The stats, everything you put together with the statistical website, that is a huge help to all of us that call the games because we can just go right there and find everything. The site's easily navigable, and you guys do a great job on social media. So I appreciate you taking some time out here tonight, and hopefully we'll cross paths at some point down the line here in the next week or two.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. It's Tom Reisweiber from the Erie Times and GoErie.com. Let's bring in James Dotson here for a couple of final parting thoughts here. You and I have an interesting game Wednesday night with Trinity and Mohawk. We're going to see just how this Mohawk team handles the District 3 champ. And, every time that we get a game now where it's at the end of the season, it's potentially the last game for this guy or the last game for that guy. It's also the time of year where those guys end up stepping up and scoring 40 in a game at some point to keep their season alive. We potentially have that on Wednesday night in a guy like Bobby Fadden. But just the other thing, too, that I think is going a little bit unnoticed here after round one, I just don't know that people understand how wide open this western side of 6A boys is right now.
Yeah, it really is. So first, for the Bobby Fadden point, you're talking about a kid who just became the number 3 scorer in Lawrence County history. He's now in the top 20 in boys basketball scoring in District 7 history. Those are some pretty fantastic accolades, to say the very least. But you're right. You need to have uncanny performances, and down the stretch, you need somebody you can count on to, potentially take that last shot, which I think is definitely something that Mohawk has certainly had now for the last 4 years. And frankly, none of us want to ever see Mr. Fadden take his final shot in a high school uniform. But, looking at 6A, like you said, with this, again, the West, quote unquote West bracket here, but there's a lot of wide open. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that Archbishop Wood, as the District 12 team infiltrating into the West, was going to be one of the teams that you're going to have to for sure watch out for. And they were taken down by Souderton in the first round. Now you got a couple of District 1 teams still hanging out with them and Methacton. But obviously Newcastle, Upper St. Clair, the top 2 out of District 7, Central Catholic, a grinded out team against Chambersburg. That's going to be a fun game. Honestly, you can see just about any one of those 8 teams making the run. It's all going to be matchup based, and what team can match up best one against the other. And again, who can be the team that you can trust to have a player make that final shot when they need it most down the stretch.
Some really rough road trips too. You're talking about basically bookends from the other side of the state that potentially could meet somewhere. And, it gets a little easier for some teams in 6A, like Plymouth Whitemarsh and Liberty. The winner of that game may not have to go that far to play a Central York or a Father Judge. Imhotep plays York, and then they get either Delaware Valley or Parkland. May not have to go very far to play that game. Newcastle and Central Dauphin. Here's going to be Newcastle on Wednesday night going all the way out to Penns Valley, a 3A gymnasium that holds 1,200 people, to play a 6A playoff game. geographically dead set between the two of them. So it's nailed as far as the geography of it. But then they're going to have to load up and get on the road and probably go about 2.5 or 3 hours again if they win to play Saturday. Which, okay, Saturday, it's a non school day, but you're still going to be traveling, 3 hours, 6 hours, two ways, to play potentially a state quarterfinal game. And then if they were to get through that, and let's say, for instance, it's a District 7 team, maybe they get a break, maybe it's Central Catholic, maybe it's Upper St. Clair. But if it's not and it's Chambersburg or Red Lion, there's another 3-hour trip the same week you're going to play for a state final. That is a rough task for teams and student athletes at this level to make, but part of the game.
Yeah, well, Tom has said it best. I mean, we've been, begging for it for the last 3 years since they had it. The state playoffs, having that whole week off, logistically, to me, doesn't make sense. You already had teams that they weren't playing in finals or consolation games on that Friday and Saturday. They've already been waiting a week. Now you're making them wait even longer. I agree. Get those games started on the Tuesday and Wednesday to get yourself more time for, especially when you get to the state semis and finals, when you should have the longer trips. I know that, you're going to have some, especially in the higher classifications, you're going to have the longer road trips going on. It is what it is. But the fact of the matter being, too, for example, Newcastle's opening round game against Wilson, it was scheduled at 1 o'clock because that's when the ideal time that the state puts out is like they wanted all those Saturday games to be at 1 o'clock. And Wilson's like, we'd be leaving at like 5:30 in the morning to be able to get out there and, to make the trip, get food before we go into the gym. Can we push it back an hour? And like, absolutely, that should be the case. So, yeah, I think there just needs to be a little bit more of a logistical, take into effect those sort of things, because, same thing. These are student athletes, Eric. These are students first. And the fact of the matter being, now with a game, I like that, like, again, this Methacton Newcastle game, they're starting it early at 5:30 so that kids aren't getting back after midnight. That's great. But then what time are they leaving school the day before? Probably, you have to leave the gym, leave the school by 12:30 probably to get out there, get loose, get everything ready to go, which means, though, you're out of class an hour before that to make sure they're eating lunch before they leave. Just the whole routine is very, very messed up. I don't know what the full solution is. I would make a big argument that you could say we have too many teams that are going in the tournament to begin with, that maybe if you cut it down a little bit, you have less travel from the get-go, and then maybe, again, an extra day in between to be able to have the kids get back in class, rest up, so they're not spending 5 hours on a bus one day and then playing games 3 days later again on 5 hours on the bus each way. There's lots of different things I think you can look at. But in the end, student athlete first, and I applaud the teams that are making sure and asking for games to be, postponed, at least time-wise, to allow their kids to stay in school as long as possible.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. That's a tough trip for both Methacton and Newcastle, but in the interest of fairness, they've got to do what they can geographically to put those two teams equidistant from one another.
I'll take that over the one team having to go 4.5 hours.
Agreed.
The other team, going 5 minutes down the road too. But it's funny you say that, though, because you have that possibility. Tom was talking about the potential for that District 10 rematch in 2A girls of a Wilmington Kennedy rematch. If Wilmington wins a couple of games, if it's not Kennedy Catholic, it's Neshannock. And how about that? Two teams from different districts that are less than 5 miles apart from each other.
That's
so,
right.
You got the two teams in Lawrence, Mercer County right on the border there. That game should be played in State College, right?
Yeah. They'll pick. It'll be somewhere we don't expect it, I'm sure, but they'll have to find a good quality gym for that. Maybe Newcastle if it's available. I also think too that it makes it tough for teams, especially the 6A boys. That again, Saturday it's fine, but I was talking to a coach yesterday who had to basically tell me, like, we have really had to, like, just tighten our schedule as far as coaches go, because you're getting off the court on, like on a Saturday afternoon, you're traveling home. If you're kind of away from home, or if you were lucky enough to be the home team, it makes it easier. But then you're like, all of a sudden, like, it's Sunday and like we have to do film now. Then we have to throw everything in on Monday. Then we got to go play the game. We get another day of practice and we got to kind of throw everything together as far as a game plan and all that. And some of these coaches are a little stretched in at this point too. So it makes it an interesting, dichotomy of the travel and the prep and everything like that. And then you're also playing on a Wednesday. You're also losing Thursday essentially as a full practice day because you just took a 5 or 6 hour round trip to get to and from your gym, and then you basically have one day to practice before you go play another state playoff game. It's and I think back sometimes to some of the old state college days when I covered games in for that high school, and Drew Frank, who was the legendary head coach there, he literally would just tell his guys to go dressed, get off the bus, go in the locker room, take off the warm up, get out on the floor and start shooting. He was just get off the bus and go play. It wasn't any of this like sit around. He's like, these guys are sitting around long enough on a bus. They don't need to be sitting around, when we get in the gym. We don't need to get somewhere 3.5 hours early and just sit around and wait. It was, or hurry up and wait. It was just simply take the warm ups off, go out there, get a rack and start shooting and let's go. And, they were successful for many years under that philosophy. So it's going to be curious to see how some of these teams manage it. I do wish that they would potentially look at doing the state tournament on Tuesday and Wednesday after the district finals. Many teams are playing Wednesday, Friday during the week anyway. Sometimes it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sometimes it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Sometimes it's Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So they're already cramming potentially 3 games into a week. You're not factoring in the weather, and you have to make those games up sometimes. So maybe it's even 4 games in a week, given some of the weather and all that. But I do think that it should be looked at, and I hope that the PIAA does decide at some point to maybe bump that back and do Tuesday, Wednesday right after districts, and then end the semifinals on a Friday, Saturday to give teams enough time to, there's all kinds of logistics in getting to Hershey too. I mean, last year, there was a coach who was asking me after their semifinal, where are we going to shoot when we go to Hershey? And I gave him the list of, 3 ADs to call, and he ended up, finding one of them and was able to get a place in the Harrisburg area to go shoot and just kind of get a walkthrough and stuff. But it's like, that's all part of it too. Like, you're winning a game on a Friday, even if your title game isn't until the following Thursday, you've got to arrange travel, hotels, meals, get into a gym. You can't go on the Giant Center floor before the state finals until you shoot before your game. I'm not even sure you're allowed to get in the building to even look at it before your shoot around before a game. So
you don't have Ollie up on the shoulders measuring the basket for you?
There's no 10 feet thing there when you get there. I mean, it makes it it really does make it for an interesting week, and the logistics of all these guys putting it together. But salute to all the coaches and ADs and bus drivers and staff and boosters and everything that make it all go, because it is, and it's not easy for the PIAA to put these things together either. I mean, let's not forget that. They've got to have these ADs on speed dial and studying how far teams go and make sure the gym's available and make sure staff is available, and try not to like a team like Chambersburg, for instance, their boys team is playing Wednesday night, and their gym I think is open Wednesday night for a second round game. So some staff is going to be, or maybe it's Tuesday night that it's open, but some staff is going to be unable to go to a game because they've got to work the game or keep it running. And all these schools are very cooperative in putting that all together. It's not an easy gig all around for this to work.
No, and every time you think you have it all figured out, then there's 3 other headaches that then end up popping up. And so, no, big hats off, like you said, everybody involved in the logistics of it. And same thing on the media end. I mean, you heard from 4 different people here talking tonight of their different locations, and they're trying to figure out where they're going to be going on these next 2 nights and how they can get all the coverage for all their teams to the best of their ability. So hats off to everybody trying to figure out who they can contact. And I can't get out to this gymnasium, maybe I can call one of them from that district and see if they can help out. There's a lot of stuff that goes into being able to cover these teams, and same with it too. On the broadcasting end of things, the rights fees that go into it. I think a lot of people don't realize that we don't do broadcasts for free. There are rights fees that go into it for audio broadcast, video broadcast, the whole 9 yards. And because of that too, anytime somebody goes and pulls out their cell phone and tries to do a Facebook live stream in the middle of the game, you wonder why we absolutely lose our minds over that. Is because you're basically trying to do something illegally when organizations like us are paying up to $2,000 to make sure that our teams are being covered the right way. So I do implore everybody to please, take that with respect, and try to support the athletes in any way that they can. And when we can't get to one of your team's games that you feel we should have, there's a lot of logistical reasons for it that you probably don't don't know about. But that's just on the media end, and it's even tenfold when you talk about the student athletes and the ads and coaches who are probably not getting any sleep most nights as they're dissecting film between figuring out where they're going to go and have breakfast on their way out to a 4-hour game on a Saturday morning.
It's very true. So here's what we're going to do for next week. We obviously know that the second round is tomorrow night and Wednesday night. The quarterfinals are Friday and Saturday. Because the semifinals are on Monday night, we will try to put together a show for Sunday to preview the semifinals on a Monday and Tuesday, and then perhaps Wednesday, if we can all reconfigure everything, we'll give you a preview show as well, looking at the 12 state championship games from Giant Center, little extended preview. That is in the works too. So Sunday and then the following Wednesday, we'll have another show for you. Big thanks tonight to our guests. We had Dan Sostek from PennLive.com. We had Chris Massey from the Williamsport Sun-Gazette, Tom Reisenweiber from the Erie Times, GoErie.com, and Brad Everett from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll have a fresh set of guests for you coming up again on Sunday. Enjoy wherever you're going tomorrow and Wednesday. We will talk to you over the weekend.